Everyone has a story, a history, a sequence of events that has helped shape who they are. Some stories are happy, some are heartbreaking. But everyone has a story. Even here, the people in this room, sitting all around you, these are some of our stories.
Hi, my name is Aaron. I'm 25 years old. I grew up in Washington, D.C. My profession is a Coast Guard, and I am a counter-narcotics officer. I deal with human trafficking, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, all kinds of various situations, and there's never a dull moment in my job. Sometimes it helps me grow closer to God. Growing up in Washington, D.C., as an inner city youth, it's not very easy to trust or to be reliant on others. As I was growing up, I was physically abused by my biological mother and not treated well at all by my biological family. I was adopted at the age of 13 by my youth pastor, who played a very, very important and key role in my life and in my salvation. I remember going to him and just wondering why things didn't add up right, as far as things in life, as far as feeling the way I felt. I felt very empty. I felt very alone and just defensive against everyone that I came in contact with because of the things I dealt with as a child.
Hello, my name is Anne. I was born 75 years ago in England. I had British parents, but I like to add the fact that I was conceived in Hungary because it gives a little bit of a taste of what the rest of my growing up life was like. My father was with an oil company, and we moved, I think, probably at least every 2 years as I was growing up. And so now if somebody asks me where I'm from, I have a very difficult time answering because I don't know where I'm from. We moved around a lot. My parents were nominal Anglicans. As far as I know, at that point they didn't know the Lord. I was raised to believe in God, but I didn't know anything about Jesus. My husband David and I have 4 children. 2 of them are biological children, and 2 of them adopted.
My name is Nicolas. I'm 50 years old. My wife is Araceli, and I got 2 kids with her. Is Elide and Jacob. I was born in Mexico, and I moved into Oregon when I was 17, and I started working at the nursery.
As a child, from the ages of 3 to about 9 years old, I was taken from my mom's care and put in my grandmother's care because my biological mother had mental illness called schizophrenia, and which could have led to some of the abuse I went through. And um, between my grandmother and my biological mother, through those years, I kind of bounced back in the custody of both of them. And I just remember, not knowing exactly where I would end up next. I was always in and out of school. I've missed a couple of years of elementary school due to hardship situations with my grandmother and my mother, always being between their custody. And just remembering my grandmother trying to provide her best for me, and she did everything that she could for me. She recently passed away this last June, and my biological mother currently resides in Washington, D.C. as well. It's been 15 years since I've talked to her, and it's there's a lot of forgiveness that has to be there on my part that I currently deal with from day to day, and she is hard to talk to at times. As my grandmother proceeded to get older, my aunt Anne recognized this, and she had both of us move from Washington, D.C. to live in Florida with her. And there, my aunt took custody of me and took care of me as my grandmother aged. And she was the very another key person in my life, because she knew the Lord, and she would always take me to church, and she would always encourage me to read the Bible. As she was reaching through to me, she had me read John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. And that verse was key, because who would give up their only child to save a bunch of people that he knew were going to sin and cause just hardship and turmoil through the world. Instead, he chose to love us unconditionally and show us that he would go to any length to love us. And I would stay out past curfew, hang out with my friends, and just remember getting into an altercation with my uncle, and leaving home and staying with my best friend. And at the time, my youth pastor, my dad now, it was Thanksgiving Day. He called, and he asked my aunt, where is Aaron? And she said, here's the number, call him at this number. And he called me at my best friend's house, and I just remember being so ashamed and so embarrassed, because of the fact that I felt like I was letting him down. I felt like I was being a huge disappointment. And he talked to me for about 2 hours, asking me exactly what was going on, and I prayed with him, and he said that if you get a chance, call your aunt and ask for forgiveness. And I just remember telling him, yeah, I'll do that, but I don't think I did that. After that conversation, he called me back later and said, well, my wife and I have been thinking about this ever since we left you and moved to Virginia. The reason for him moving to Virginia is because he is a fighter pilot in the Navy, and he has to move around often. And he told me that he would call me back and at the end of the week. So as a week goes by, I'm still staying at my best friend's house because I don't want to go home because of the fact that I don't know exactly how to ask for forgiveness. I don't feel in my heart to ask for forgiveness at this time. And he calls me back at the end of the week and asked if I would not mind moving with him and his family. And as a teenager, I said, sure, yeah, why not? And as I moved in with my youth pastor and his family, I just remember having a private conversation with him, and he asked me, do you want to become part of our family? Do you feel like you could do that? And I remember telling him that I don't know exactly what family is. I don't. I felt like that growing up in a world that was kind of second nature to feel the emptiness and being alone, because of not having a family, not growing up with mom and dad. I've never known my biological father. My biological mother, like I said before, physically abused me and didn't want anything to do with me. So it was something that I it's very new to me, and I told him this, and he said that he went through the same things and he was adopted as well, and he understood exactly how I felt. And I was thinking all along, like, I'm going to be the only one in the world that's going to feel this. But being confronted by someone that went through something exactly similar, and he just understood exactly where I was coming from, so I felt like I had to be a part of this family. I had no choice. God put this in front of me and said, here you go, don't mess this up.
As I say, as growing up, we moved a tremendous lot, and my parents and I lived for, I think, about 6 months in Hungary. Then we moved to Scotland, and we were there for a little while, and then in England. And at that point, we are getting to when I was 2 years old, which was 1940, and World War II was really warming up in England at that point. Since my mother was born in South Africa and her mother was still living there, the rest of the family decided that my mother should take me and go back to South Africa to stay with her mother until the war was over, so that we'd be out of harm's way. Everyone thought that would be just a few months. It turned out to be 4 years before we got back to England and before we saw my father again. The way we got back from South Africa to England was in a converted luxury liner, which was now a troop ship. And I can't imagine what it was like for my mother, because it was so dangerous. Of course, at the age of 6, I had no idea. And apparently they sighted 8 enemy submarines while we were on that trip. And a torpedo could have come through the wall of the boat at any moment, but I had no notion of any of that. I just remember the trip as being fun. When we got back to England, I remember meeting my father after 4 years, and just knowing that that man over there was my daddy and I could run to him and be safe with him. It just felt so good to have a daddy again. We lived in, of course, South Africa, England, and then we lived in the Bahamas, in Nassau, for 2 years. My father was transferred there. After Nassau, we went to Venezuela, And my parents were there for 15 years. I just lived with them there for the first two. And then at the age of 12, I was sent to boarding school in England. In the school, it was, we were taught the Anglican faith. We used to go to church every week. And at the age of 13, we had confirmation classes. This was when we learned the catechism, which had very good truth in it, and had to answer questions. And then we had a service when we were confirmed. The bishop came and laid hands on us, and we said that we answered all the questions and said that yes, we wanted to follow the faith, Christian faith. That was very meaningful to me. I knew about God, I loved him and wanted to follow him. I had just never been told what Jesus had to do with it. And I didn't understand that. I thought I just had to be good in order to go to heaven. The trouble was, the more I tried to be good, the more I discovered I could not be good.
We were three boys and two sisters. I was raised in Morelos, and I was raised like a Catholic. My dad was a really heavy drinker. He was mean when he was drunk. Abused my mom, physical and verbal. My dad was take me sometimes with him to the bars when I was 15, and when I was 16, I started drinking too. Later, my dad moved to Oregon. He asked me if I want to come to Oregon. I decided to come to Oregon to help the family. 3 years later, my dad decided to leave United States and go back to Mexico. And that time he asked me if I want to go back, and I told him, I said, I got a girlfriend and I'm engaged. I want to stay. I was married in February. 2 years later, my wife was pregnant, and 4 months later, the doctor told us she was carrying twins, and but one of the twins was has got a birth defect. My wife spent 7 weeks at the hospital. She delivered the babies early at 7 months. It was a boy and a girl. I not remember exactly how much my little girl, how much she weighs, but she only got the chance to live 2 minutes in this world. Later, when after we got back from the hospital, we got the situation about little problems. I think the main problem was money. We constantly arguing and fighting and yelling. So we decided to move to Canby. I got a new job. I think it was a better pay. And a year later, she was pregnant again. I thought maybe this new baby maybe changed my life and trying to be a better father. The problems never stopped. We both started drinking. We were drinking, both of them we were drinking, but it wasn't not every day, but it was every weekend. It was alcohol in the house, and I was having so much anger on me. I was building inside me like a bomb, and I knew sooner or later they were going to explode. And And my son's birthday, we were having a big party, and we invited friends and family. We got a lot of alcohol, and everybody was drinking, and something went wrong. And I we were yelling with each other, and I was so angry, so I slapped my wife in the face. My son, he saw that, and he called the police. So that night I got arrested. Me and my wife, after we got back together, this got worse, because I think of my wife trying to have some kind of revenge, what I did. And she started going out on the weekends, and finally we decided to split completely. I mean, go separate ways. A year and a half later, I met Araceli. After 2 years, we decided to move together. I thought it was the opportunity for me to have a second chance. But at that time, I wasn't divorced yet. She comes from a broken marriage. She got 2 kids on her own.
At the age of 12, I received news about my uncle Raymond, who was a key figure in my life, but he lived in Washington, D.C., and I lived in Florida at the time, and he was my only father figure, and he was killed due to drugs. And I just remember being devastated at 12 years old and being so angry and distraught at the world that nothing really mattered to me, but why did this happen? What exactly was it that I could do to change this? And my aunt described to me that when you sin, there are consequences to your actions. God is not necessarily angry with you, but He is just, and He will love you no matter what. And she asked me, have I given my life to the Lord? And I asked her, what exactly does that mean? And she told me to pray with her, and told me that once I become a child of God, that I will have eternal life. Once I perish from this earth, that I will keep on living. And I prayed with her, and I just remember praying with her, and being kind of relieved of a lot of different things, the kind of the pain and the anxiety and the feeling alone in the world. And it was very apparent to me that I needed this a long time ago, and that it's something that can never be replaced.
When I left high school, I went to school in London, to a technical college for 2 years, because our high school didn't have the technical subjects, enough equipment for me to study the subjects I needed in order to study medicine, which is what I had decided to do at that point. While I was in college in London, I heard about a group of people who had what they called a Christian Union. Finally, I got up my nerve and I went and went to one of their meetings. And they were just a motley bunch of students, normal kind of kids. But as I spent time with them, I began to realize that they really were different. When they talked about the Bible, they talked about it as if it was really true, that everything it said came from God. And I thought, well, I don't know, really? And when they prayed, it sounded as if they were praying, really praying to somebody who was listening. And all this was kind of different for me. While we were there, while I was attending the Christian Union, we received an invitation from an Anglican church in London to a tea one Sunday afternoon. Well, you invite a student to tea, and if it involves food, you go, right? Because we were all starving and didn't get enough to eat. So a whole bunch of us from the Christian Union attended this tea. It was very nice. We sang Christian songs, most of which I didn't know at all, and just sat around and chatted and ate. At the end of the tea, we were invited to stay for the evening service. At the end of the service, he said, if there's anyone here who would like to follow Jesus Christ, come forward and we will talk to you. Well, I thought to myself, surely you wouldn't be in church unless you wanted to follow Jesus Christ, whatever that means. So I started to go forward and expected all my friends from the Christian Union to come forward too. But of course, they knew that I wasn't a Christian, and they were, so they were all kind of encouraging me, go ahead, go ahead. So I shrugged my shoulders and went ahead and was assigned a counselor and taken downstairs to talk. After a short time, I realized these people think I'm not a Christian, and they're trying to convert me, which was actually the case, but I thought I was a Christian. So I thought, well, my best thing to do right now is to agree with everything they say and get out of here as fast as I can. So I did that. But after a while, I kept going to the church because I really liked them. They were friendly and it was fun to be there and so on. And after a while, they started a program, they planned a program of visitation in the neighborhood. So I joined the training sessions for this visitation without realizing that I really didn't know anything about all this. And while I was learning how to lead someone to Jesus Christ is when I found out what the gospel was all about. And I began to understand what it was that Jesus Christ was all about. He had died for me. He had paid for my sins so that I could go to heaven even without trying to be perfect, which had been my method before, because he had taken care of the sin. And so because of him, I could be clean in God's sight and go to heaven. And so one evening, I was all by myself in my digs, the place where I lived, and I knelt down and I accepted Jesus Christ's sacrifice as being for me, and gave my life to him.
One day, I think it was Martha, brought a whole bunch of kids to play soccer at Shrewsbury. Brandon he loves soccer, so he got invited to play with these kids. So later, my girlfriend that time, she got invited to come to the church. I didn't feel comfortable to talk to other people. I didn't feel comfortable at all to be in a place, a church. So I, once in a while, I went. It wasn't my thing to go to church. One day, Gregorio decided to stop by at my house and ask me if I would like to have a Bible study with him. I said, sure, why not? As long as I don't have to go there, I'll be fine. As long as it's here in my house, that'll be fine. Every time Gregorio used to come to the house, I show up with already alcohol in my system. One day I told Gregorio, I said, "You're wasting my time with me. I don't think it's a reason for you to keep coming to my house and trying to teach me and to understand what you're trying to tell me, trying to understand something I don't know." And he asked me, I said, "You sure you want me to go? If you want me to go, I'll go. But you tell me to go." It's sort of like it hit me something, and I feel like I don't have the guts to tell him to go. He asked me if I want to continue this Bible study. I say, "Yeah, sure, no problem." At the same time, me and my brother, we were still working together and having alcohol almost every day. But one day, something really deep inside me, it told me that something said to need to stop. I don't know what it was, but I had to stop. And I told my brother, "I don't want any more alcohol." And since that day, I started drinking. And I started taking more seriously the Bible study. It was hard for me to understand. Somebody was taking his time for me to understand something I don't understand. But I started praying in my way. And one day, Gregorio asked me if I want to pray. I said, "I don't know how." Um, Gregorio was telling me what to do, but I told him, I said, "I don't know how to pray." He was telling me, he said, "Well, our God knows what you want to say to Him. Just close your eyes." And I closed my eyes, and that was my first time to pray. I don't think I surrendered that day, but I think I knew it was the beginning, a new life for me. He was explaining to me why Jesus died for me. I don't know how many days went on for a while, but I was looking for something. I was looking to surrender myself. To surrender my life. One day, I got up in the morning, early in the morning. That was between me and God together. I surrendered that morning. I that day I got saved. That day I knew Jesus.
My aunt was devastated because of the fact that she felt like she couldn't do anything for me, although that she played a key and important role by leading me to the Lord. And I felt devastated because I felt like I broke that relationship in so many different ways, and not just because she was family, but by being so ungrateful and kind of spitting on her because of she opened her heart and her home to me, and she just gave me the greatest gift of all, which was love, unconditional love. And I talk to her from time to time now, each day, and tell her, what the Lord's doing in my life currently. So that relationship has been restored since.
I had already decided to be a medical doctor because, as I say, I believed in God and wanted to please Him. And I thought being a doctor would please Him because it's helping people. But now that I really knew the Lord, at least started on that journey, I thought, well, now, excuse me, I better find out whether God really wants me to be a doctor, and if He wants me to be a missionary, maybe. On the Wednesday of that week, I had the radio on in the background, and in Britain at that point there was no Christian radio except for a 5-minute program in the morning called 5 to 10, a story, a hymn, and a prayer. Well, that particular morning, the story was about a woman medical missionary. And it was kind of like Lord said, there's your answer. Yes, I want you to be a doctor, and I want you to be a missionary. And I thought, wow, this is terrific. God answers prayer in wonderful ways. After I graduated from medical school in England, I went to do my internship in Victoria, British Columbia. Bert and Colleen Elliott, who were working as missionaries in Peru, had invited Anne, my friend Anne Monday. She had been invited by them to spend some time with them on the mission field. And she wrote to them and she said, would it be all right if I brought a British doctor with me to come and work with you as well? We lived for 6 weeks at a time on their little launch. There was just room for bunk beds on one side where Bert and Colleen slept, and on the other side was the dining room table that converted into a bunk at night, and the fourth one was lying on the floor in the middle. Anne and I would take turns to be the one on the floor. So I went back to Victoria, and I wasn't there, I don't think, more than a month and a half before I came down with acute rheumatoid arthritis. Now, I had been called to the jungles, I thought, of Ecuador, where it is hot, muddy, humid, not the kind of place that someone goes who is suffering from rheumatoid arthritis. So it was very hard for me to understand what that was all about. I was told to go to bed for a month, which I did, and little by little recovered. Then they told me to get a job, a quiet job. So I got a job as a resident in surgery in Shaughnessy Hospital in Vancouver, BC, and it wasn't a quiet job. Not only did I have to do my own work, but 2 other residents failed to show up. One got sick, and I don't know what happened to the other one. I ended up doing the work of 3 residents in a busy hospital in Vancouver. that, I'm sure, was just the Lord showing me that I was not an invalid anymore. I could handle hard work and to get on back to where He had sent me. So after a year at that job, I did go back to Ecuador. I took a barrel with me, you know, the missionary barrel. Well, I had one barrel and one suitcase and went back to Ecuador. So I'm in the jungle in Ecuador, working between 3 different mission stations, being taken to them and from them by Missionary Aviation Fellowship. One day I was in Shell, which was where their hangar was and the hub of their operations, going from one station to the other, and the weather socked in, so we were unable to fly, and I stayed in Shell to have lunch with a missionary doctor and his family. At the same time, a group of new missionaries had come down from Quito on the orientation to their new mission, HCJB World Radio, as it was called then. One of those missionaries was, 2 of them were single guys. One of them was named David Cliff. And we met on that occasion because we all ended up having lunch at the same home. David said he became interested right away. I wasn't interested because I thought he was a lot younger than I was. But little by little, over the next few months, he and I corresponded. His first letter was more or less declaring himself, and it took 6 weeks to get to me, even though we're in the same country and just down the road. My reply took another 2 weeks to get to him, and he thought I was ignoring him. But actually, I was telling him to look around Quito for somebody because we were too different. Well, over the next few months, we did get to know each other as I went to Quito and he came down to visit in the jungle. And we got engaged in March of 1968. We did get married. I joined the mission HCJB, and we spent 40 years in Ecuador together, 2.5 years in Puerto Rico, and 4 years leave of absence in Spokane, Washington. And then when we got to the ripe old age of late 60s, we retired and came to live in Hillsboro in Oregon. And here we are.
My first marriage, I didn't know how to communicate to my kids. I don't know how to express my love for him, for my kids. My easy way to do it was buy some gifts. I thought that was enough for me, and of course the kids were happy, but I always kind of at the end it was kind of empty inside me. Before I used to live for myself. I used to do lots of things long as it was about money. It was my worry was to make some money. But I see my life differently now.
So before Christ, I felt alone and I felt very empty, and had no direction. After salvation, I felt like there was a purpose He put me here for, which is to reach out to people that need love and compassion.
I feel like I was carrying for a long time something really sometimes it feels like it's something really heavy. Is can I not be able to carry it anymore?
As I have grown throughout the years, I've learned to discover that through this is a very, very cruel world, and I am becoming more and more dependent on God, and His salvation has for me has been very, very real in my life and very burden relieving.
So, as I look back over 57 years of being a Christian, I just marvel at the fact of God's faithfulness. Here I've been a missionary for all that number of years, and God has supplied everything we have needed. He has supplied all our needs, not necessarily all our wants, but all our needs. He's given peace when there would naturally have been no peace in certain situations.
Now I feel like I got a future.
I think that if I would have continued on now without Christ, that I could be, a drug dealer or involved in some type of illicit activity that is not going to be fruitful necessarily for my life or anyone around me.
When I think of how I thought when I was growing up that in order to get to heaven you had to be good, that was basically what I'd been taught. And as I say, when I tried to be good, I found that I couldn't consistently be good. And so how can you get to heaven? When somebody explained to me that if you want to get to heaven on your own power, you have to be perfect because sin is not allowed in heaven.
Where do you think you're going to be tomorrow when you die? What about if tomorrow is too late?
Hi, my name is Aaron.
My name is Anne.
Hi, my name is Nicolas.
These were some of our stories. What will your story be?